Force with Friends is back. The boys are back in town, and we're talking Tales of the Sith today. So I'm super excited about this one. We've been kind of texting back and forth about this one for, I guess, a couple of weeks now. And this may be, like, personally our most anticipated one we've done in a little bit. So kind of fun.
Yeah, we were just talking about how exciting it was. I think it's just because there's so little extra material out there on the Sith, right? Like there's a lot about the Jedi. I mean, there's some stuff out there, but
there's books and stuff. Yeah,
it's a lot of fun to think about what really cool Sith stories they could put into animation like that. So there's a lot of cool ideas. So I'm excited to hear what you came up with.
Yeah, and Star Wars animation. If you're a Star Wars animation fan, or if you're just like a Star Wars fan familiar with animation, they don't miss very often. So like the prospect of this is pretty exciting. Like if they did do it, it would be pretty good, most likely. So Tales of the Sith, we'll each kind of go back and forth throwing out maybe what tales we would like to see. I also threw this out on Threads just to see if anybody had any cool ideas, and we did get some of those as well. So we will discuss those, at least those that we had at the time of this recording. So if you're on Threads and you leave it and you watch it and you're like, oh, y'all didn't say my thing, we already filmed. So yeah, that's kind of the thing. So and small channel, like we don't get a ton of responses anyways, we're modest people, but let's go ahead and dive in to our Threads response. So Andrew Haley 05, Andrew, he watches, he'll throw in stuff like on YouTube as well, and Instagram too. So whenever we call for audience stuff, he always has like some great ideas. So this, no different here. He threw out 3 possibilities, and I think we could probably spend like probably 10 to 15 minutes for sure talking about these 3 possibilities. So we'll hop in with the first one. I think you're going to like this first one. So Andrew said the rise of Darth Plagueis. So like getting into his origins and his rise to power, and exploring like his experiments with life and death. And that's kind of like the Plagueis novel, but the Plagueis novel picks up like a good ways in. You don't
that's true.
It's right when he turns into the Master. So
yeah,
I would like that.
Yeah, and I think the Star Wars fandom is kind of on a Plagueis kick right now. I think people got their hands on that novel, which has been around for a while, but for whatever reason, like people are into Plagueis right now. So it's a good time to capitalize. Like I think it would be fascinating, especially because you find that Plagueis is kind of doing things a little bit differently. Like he's kind of manipulating the science and the Force together. And so it would be really interesting to see what pushes him down that path. Like how does he get to be a Sith Lord, and what really compels him to be like, I'm going to do things differently than the guys before me. I think anything Plagueis would be a home run. I think people would love it. But man, especially like early Plagueis, that would be really interesting.
For sure.
I'd be down for that.
Plagueis too, even like his origins and rise to power. If you read the novel, it wasn't just the Force, and it wasn't just the whole science either. He was like a business guy as well. Like he had a lot of money running the banking stuff.
Character.
Yeah. So and just when you read it, some of it does play into canon as well, like showing Palpatine like, hey, this is how we're going to come into power. It's going to be through politics, through business, and then when we get to power, we're going to use the Force. And I mean, they used it, here and there, but it was very kind of conniving how they went about it.
Yeah. And honestly, I think some of the most interesting stuff with the Sith is how people become Sith. Like what drives them, whether it's bitterness or power hungry or revenge or whatever it is. It's really fascinating what drives people to the Sith.
Yeah.
And one of my ideas later is kind of along those lines, because it harkens back to do you remember Screecher's Reach?
Star I remember.
Visions
and Visions. Yeah.
One of my favorite episodes, and it plays out as like this hero, but then you realize it's a Sith origin story, and I just thought that was so cool. So I'd love to get more like how people became Sith, and like really what pushed them into that side of the Force. So that'd be cool to do with Plagueis.
No, I agree, and also like even the Acolyte, we've said it, everyone said it, like had its issues, and
Sure.
the biggest issue is how much money it spent and the viewership it brought in. That's the biggest issue. But
Yeah.
story wise, there were some
Yeah.
issues, but also there was some good stuff there too. So if you like, hey, we're not going to continue the Acolyte, but we're going to do this little Plagueis story and kind of how he ended up there, and we'll touch on it a little bit later for one of the things I want to see. But just kind of like, okay, Plagueis at this point, what's he doing? And kind of, you could branch out that story a little, just Plagueis focus. So I think the Plagueis story is a good one. Now, the second one, I'm not as familiar with, but I feel like you will be. Bane's legacy. So like chronicling the life of Darth Bane. He created the Rule of Two, and his efforts to rebuild the Sith Order. So now I haven't read the Bane novels, but I have been told recently that I should, that they're very good. So I know you've read most of the stuff.
Yeah, I that was actually one of the things I had written down for an idea. Is because in the canon, there's not a lot about Darth Bane at this point, right? Like a lot of it's either legend stuff or it's very vague.
There's a little bit in the Clone Wars, right?
Yeah,
like Yoda has that vision or whatever.
Yeah, where he kind of where they see
something
it.
Like that. Yeah,
I think it would be awesome to see, and this is what I was thinking, is like if you get to see Darth Bane implement the Rule of Two, right? Like where he's like, this isn't working, because there's no way that went peacefully, right? Like for him to just suddenly decide there's only going to be 2 Sith.
We're having layoffs.
Like to see him just go through and just wipe out the rest of the Sith, like that had to have happened somehow. I think that would be a great story, is the implementation of the Rule of Two by Darth Bane. That would be so cool.
The Office episode, the downsizing episode.
Yeah.
It takes like a Michael Scott spin on downsizing the Sith. They're like, who's going to make it?
Yeah. It's like a whole, they could have a whole thing. No, but that would be cool.
Funny.
I think that's a great idea. That was one of the ones I had jotted down, was definitely some Darth Bane.
Also, like if you look at this from, at that point, that's where the Sith were like, yes, we are defeated handily, right? Like our survival is going to come from our hidden nature at this point. Right. So it almost, not that it would be like correct, but if you were watching it from that perspective, it would almost be as if it's like an underdog story. Like the Sith.
Yeah, no, really. Yeah, I think that's a really cool idea in place within the lore to explore. Is that implementation of that rule, like how he came to that, like what it looked like, and just like you mentioned, just the sheer desperation of the Sith at that point to survive. I think that'd be great. I'd be all about that. I think that could be super fascinating.
And I'm not super into origin stories, just as a rule of thumb for my entertainment, but I would be very interested in this one because, like you said, we don't have a lot of Sith stuff on screen either. So that would be cool. And now this last one, was my favorite one that Andrew suggested. Palpatine's Apprentices. So it focuses on the training and missions of Palpatine's secret apprentices, showcasing the hidden machinations behind the rise of the Empire. Because Palpatine always had like a few different backup plans and layers.
Oh, for sure.
And he was not solely committed to anybody. So I think that would be a fun one to watch, because you get that crummy Palpatine, like, not loyal to anyone and always wanting power. You get that aspect, plus some new characters. I would like that.
Yeah. It would be, in the way they do the Tales stuff, it'd be cool to just see it throughout distinct periods, like getting an apprentice, like getting an apprentice under Plagueis, and then getting an apprentice like maybe before Maul or after Maul, and then of course maybe he's got somebody on the back burner while Vader's around.
Yeah, like that's what I was thinking. Cool. The Vader thing,
because obviously he's looking, he's super interested in getting Luke. You got to think that he didn't just become interested in acquiring more people, a backup just plan like before Luke came around. So that'd be cool. I feel like you could pull off some really good stories, especially with the whole, like, if Vader finds out that there was an apprentice,
takes him out.
Or the same thing with Plagueis, or if there's more than one apprentice and they both end up trying to take out Palpatine, as like a side plan. Like, there's a lot you could do with that would be really cool. I'd be down for that, because that's so Palpatine to always have that backup plan.
Yeah. I
I like
thought
that.
that was
That's a good
just
one.
such a fun idea. I thought it was
Yeah.
good. So that was
Do
what we
like
had
that.
submitted from Andrew. So let's, which all of those were very good, and I think
Yeah.
each of those hit on stuff that we're going to talk about as well.
Yeah.
But go ahead. Why don't you jump in and tell your first Tales of the Sith idea?
Okay. So it would be I was thinking about how they've done the Tales stuff. I feel like for a lot of my ideas they'd have to depart from the way they've done things, because really in the past it's been a lot of enrichment, right? They don't introduce a lot of new characters. They don't introduce a lot of it's really enriching stuff that's
That's
kind of already
true.
there.
Yeah.
But I'd really like to see some new stuff, especially with the Sith. Like, take me back to like the first Sith, right? Let me see the split between the Jedi and where the Sith formed, and kind of how uh, that ideological gap developed, right? I think it would be really fascinating because it's not just that they're on polarizing ends, it's that they are literally opposite sides of this thing, right? Like the Sith code is like the opposite of the Jedi code, right? They are intentionally in opposition of the Jedi. Yeah. And so I'd love to see that break. I'd love to see that split where they're like, we're going to be everything that you're against what you're choosing to be.
Right.
I feel like there could be a really cool story there, especially with if it's a group of Sith who kind of break off and become this new group. Now, at that point, you are developing new canon, right? Because that doesn't really exist firmly, and so that's where I don't know if the Tales stuff is going to go that route. But that's a story I'd love to explore, though, and I think it would be really good for this type of just short form storytelling of just like these little glimpses of how this thing came apart.
Came to be. Well, it would be new canon, but it wouldn't be completely like a new idea, though. You know what I mean? Like it's
Obviously,
an established idea, and it's just getting us to tell me more. So like it is new, but it is still kind of expanding upon what we do know, just giving us some stories to it. I think that would be fun, though.
Especially, I think it'd be cool to see the Sith begin to do things that the Jedi are like, wait a second, like this isn't like you're using the Force to do what? Like this isn't who we are, and then really seeing that division come about. I feel like there could be some really cool just themes and ideas woven into there about the Force and the nature of the Force that I think people are into. I think people kind of enjoy the deeper dive into the Star Wars lore. And so, yeah, I think it'd be a good backdrop for it.
Almost if it's like a slow build to it. Like, you know how Dooku's story is in Tales of the Jedi? How it he starts off as a Jedi and then
that's a good point.
It's him like I guess it ends with Qui-Gon's funeral, right? Like, or they're all going to that, and then it shows his fall there at the end, and so that's kind of a build up to that. So I think that would be a cool, like they could kind of take it that way, like, oh, here's some cracks, and then you jump ahead a few years, and it's like, oh, there's some major issues, and then you get to like that third installment or whatever it is, however so many installments, is like. Jump ahead a lot of years and you got this full Sith order like doing their thing and they're initiating people and stuff like that. That would be pretty cool.
Yeah, you're right. There's not a lot of action within Dooku's arc Tales of the Jedi. It is a lot of just kind of examining kind of what's going on in his head and why he chose the path he chose. So that would be kind of a good template for it, of just kind of seeing this thing slowly, like you know where it ends and you can kind of see it developing, but really digging into what pushed people over the edge. That's a good example.
I like that. I think that's fun.
So that's what I'd like to see. Give me Sith origin story.
Yeah, I subscribe to that one. So mine, my first one. This is not like my most wanted one, but it's one that I don't think I would have wanted. A year ago, this was not on the radar, but like. Because this character didn't exist. But I think a Chimere story would be a good one. So you look at the Acolyte again, not my favorite, not your favorite, also not my least favorite. It's like my next to least favorite. But but I will say they knocked it out of the park with him. Like his character is so good. I mean,
of the show for sure.
You've got that one episode, it's the 5th episode where he just like goes to town on everybody. So he has some conversations with Soul where he's like, the Jedi say I can't exist, right? Or like the Jedi make the rules. Yeah. He just has a lot of little lines there that make you understand, like, okay, obviously there's been a falling out or something. Like he understands that they are hypocritical at this point. Yeah. So I think, which obviously he was bad, but like there's still some cracks in that armor. So you get him, like, because we're not going to see his fall on screen, odds are. Right. Like that story's done. So you could take it to animation and you have his issue with Vernestra or whatever. Like that was his master and how he starts to fall. And then you can have, obviously he has some connection with Plagueis. Or I would assume that's kind of what they were hinting at there. Like Plagueis was watching, and I don't think Plagueis just snuck up upon the Sith. Like this is his apprentice trying to get an apprentice to take out Plagueis. So you kind of have him, and how does he come across Plagueis? And then the ending of this, and you could even pull Osha into the ending of this story if you just had to have that. I don't have to have that, but if you do, you can have Plagueis just wiping both of them out at the end. Yeah. And so kind of I think some
closure.
Yeah. It would bring some acolyte closure. It would give you some Chimere stuff, and it would also set you up on Plagueis getting to Palpatine. Which all three of those, like, honestly, that's like a cool thing. You get a little bit of everything with that story. So I like that.
Chimere's he really was one of the highlights of the show.
Just the highlight.
A lot of it's, the actor, the portrayal was fantastic. I felt like they did a great job of making him feel deceptive and mischievous in the same way as Palpatine, but not like Palpatine, right? But still having that dual kind of personality. Where he knows how to turn it on and turn it off, much like Palpatine does. So I like that they established this as like a very Sith thing, like this deceit, this manipulation, to getting people to believe you're one person when you're not, right? Like that's very Sith.
Yep.
And I also feel like, when you look at Palpatine, you get the feeling he was just never really a good guy.
Correct.
Like, it's hard for me to imagine
the most evil of guys.
It's hard for me to imagine a point wherever he was just like a nice guy, right? Like I just feel like he had to have always been kind of a jerk, even before he was a Sith. But I don't feel that way about Chimere. I feel like he was probably really bought into the Jedi at one point, and so I would be interested to see what was it that really brought about this bitterness and hatred towards the Jedi, right? Because it's pretty significant. And where did he get his cortosis? I want to know.
Well, that's where Plagueis comes in.
Yeah, but where did he get it? And who taught him to use it? And how did he know it was going to short out lightsabers? Yeah. I don't feel like that's something you go into blind.
That's true. So was that like a pun intended, where like when he wears the mask he kind of is blind? Because that was really good.
We'll pretend. Yeah, I did that completely on purpose. It was planned from the start. I had that in my notes. No, but there's a lot of cool stuff about him, and definitely being the highlight of that show. I'd love to learn a little bit more about his character and where he ends up. Right, like that's one of the few loose ends of that movie where I was really like, what becomes of Chimere was pretty interesting, especially as you mentioned, as it ties into Plagueis.
Yep. It puts him in a very interesting spot to where his story is, in some capacity, is begging to at least be wrapped up, because at some point they're gonna, and we'll probably talk about it later with Plagueis, but they're gonna get to the point to where, how did Plagueis get to Palpatine? I feel like that's going to come at some point, and it would be really weird to just ignore the Chimere aspect of that now that we know that that's a thing. So that's my first one. I was going to name was a Chimere, maybe origin, update, and finale for him all in one.
I like it. I would be interested in that.
Yeah.
I actually have a question before I go into my next one. Do you want to see more Vader stories?
Yeah, that's on my list.
It is? Okay.
Yeah.
Then I'll let you we'll hold off on that then.
Okay.
Because I'm torn on that one, but we'll talk about it. Yeah. So another story I'd really like to see. So we talked a little bit about Screecher's Reach earlier.
Mm-hmm.
The whole idea of a Sith origin story.
Yeah.
I don't care who it is. Maybe someone we don't know. Maybe a new character. But I think it would be really cool if the entire Tales is just devoted to one Sith, right? So how they become a Sith, how they overthrow their master, and then how they're overthrown by their apprentice. And it basically just follows one Sith character throughout this process that is the Sith lineage, right? Of attaining power, craving power, losing power. I would love to follow one character throughout that entire process. I feel like that would be really cool. I feel like there's a lot of really cool stuff you can do within that. Within the origin itself, within the apprentice part, and then within the overthrow part. So I think it would be cool just to see the entirety of a Sith life kind of from
like in 6 episodes. Yeah, that would be good.
So I think that would be neat. Especially after watching Screecher's Reach, like just the idea that a lot of like the Sith in our head are evil, but like this character that we see, it just so happened that it's who they got picked up by, right? And so you could, we talked a lot about the master and apprentice stuff. It's always from the perspective of the Jedi, but your master makes a big difference in terms of what you choose, right? Do you get picked up by a Sith master or a Jedi master, right? Like, and so I'd like to see more of that apprentice master dynamic with the Sith as opposed to the Jedi, and really get to contrast like how those relationships function and how they work and how the teaching goes. I'd really like to see that in opposition to what the Jedi do. I think it would be cool.
That's really interesting because if you look at it, it's kind of as a mirror of the Jedi side. Like you've got this master who's already bought in. Same for the Jedi, right? Like you've got this master who is fully committed to their line of thinking. And then you've got this apprentice who's kind of green coming into it. Like, so for the Jedi side, you've probably got questions like, well, why do we do it this way? And stuff like that. And then on the Sith side, you've probably got, well, are they wrong about everything? And you've got this guy pulling the strings like, yeah, they're wrong. And this is why. And the stuff that they're explaining is probably like half truths. Like they're probably saying some truthful things, but they're taking it to an extreme. Yeah. And so I think that would be kind of interesting seeing this like naive young apprentice go from probably not completely evil, like you said, but to all the way bought in to taking over, because they don't, we don't think they all come in evil. Yeah. I don't know. Like I
wouldn't think so. I mean, Anakin wasn't, right?
Right.
He didn't start evil. So I was just thinking about this. This is kind of a tangent, but how cool it would be if like you had a parallel structure and you follow one person throughout 3 separate stories of if they were raised by a Sith master versus raised by a Jedi master.
Oh, yeah, that would be
like
good.
How different they would become and how different their story would be. Yeah. It's kind of like a what if of both scenarios. That would be cool to see how much the master and the ideology affects the person as they go through Sith training versus Jedi training. That would be cool.
That would be really good, especially like, not to say they do it like the Acolyte per se, because again, I don't think they stuck that landing, but let's say it was like siblings though, that ended up split up and went that way. I think it could be even more compelling. And then like the finale could be the siblings fighting each other. That would be a cool thing.
Yeah. Yeah. And really focus on the teaching, right? Like what is so significantly different about the way they're learning about the Force and the way they're being taught about the Force and what the Force is supposed to be for. And seeing how that shapes the two people on a parallel path would be really interesting. Because you're right, there are shades of it in the Acolyte, but we don't really get to see it happen.
Yeah, they don't. They don't fully get there. Yeah.
So that would, I hadn't thought about that, but yeah, either give me a full Sith life, like from start to finish, entry to being overthrown by their apprentice, or that parallel structure would be cool.
For sure. What if even, this is not to send us on a tangent, but what if this was set like way far in advance, like past like Rey's Jedi Order and whatever? Like what if that rule of 2 just keeps going? I mean, obviously there's issues like with will did Anakin ever bring balance? We've already like, that ship has sailed. I feel like, when you bring Palpatine back, so like if there's going to be some kind of dark versus light and they're going to go out into this future, what if this was something set so far removed from anything we know to where it also doesn't like interfere with anything either? I like that idea as well.
Yeah. This is where
if the Sith have to end with Palpatine though.
Yeah, it's not reasonable.
Well, it's
like,
not.
I get the
but,
point of it,
but
like,
they're not
the
going to quit
balance
making Star
idea.
Wars.
I know. No. I mean, it's not reasonable that it would end.
Yeah.
Because the whole idea of balance,
that's it. Yeah.
I wish it hadn't been defined as the end of the Sith, because it's not like all the Sith holocrons in the galaxy just suddenly vanish, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Ezra stumbles across one and starts down a dark path, right? Like, they're out there. People could find it. It's not like all evidence of the Sith is gone after Palpatine.
Somehow the Sith have returned.
So they're going to be around. The teachings are going to be around. Somebody's going to find it. So, I mean, I get it. I get the Chosen One. I get the whole prophecy and all that. But at the same time, at the end, for the Sith to just be done is not really a reasonable expectation. So I don't mind that the Sith continue. I think it makes sense that somebody somewhere down the road is going to stumble across a Sith temple and be like, oh, interesting. Like, somebody who's connected to the Force and begins just learning things. And then new Sith Lord, right? Like,
snowballs.
Knowledge doesn't disappear.
That's true.
So
that is true.
I don't know.
I think,
but no, I'd be fine. If
that was just that was way out.
No,
there, but yeah,
if it's way in the future and we're kind of seeing the beginnings of a new Sith Order, like, that'd be cool.
That way, it wouldn't upset all the fanboys that are like, there can't be a Sith, and they didn't know about him. You know what I mean? Like that can turn into an issue.
To be fair, though,
they were correct.
The same people who swear by that also swear by the Legends books, where there's like a whole order of Sith that have been hidden that aren't like Rule of Two, and they've just been stashed away.
Those aren't. But that's when they would say that's not canon. You know?
Right? Yeah.
It's
that pick and choose.
Double-edged sword. So my next one, we've touched a little bit on like the Plagueis. I just want like a Plagueis and Palpatine like kind of adventure deal, like just Apprentice Palpatine and Plagueis, and it would probably not be super action filled, which may be a reason they wouldn't do this. Yeah. But just that ideology that would be explored, kind of diving into it. And maybe if they broke it into different aspects, like, okay, this part is talking about how we're going to rise politically. That's like a couple episodes. A couple episodes of it are, strictly dark side. Like, it's real dark. Like, hey, this is Sith stuff. And then a couple episodes of maybe like how Palpatine got to Plagueis, or Plagueis got to Palpatine or whatever. Like, I think that would be interesting to break it into a few parts, because they do always break these into segments.
Right.
And that would be a way that you could focus just on them and have like a couple mini arcs for each one.
I don't know though. I don't know that the lack of action would hurt it necessarily. We kind of talked about Dooku's arc earlier, and I don't think action necessarily means it's going to be amazing, right? Like, Tales of the Empire had a good bit of action, but it was a little underwhelming to me. Now
it was a lot underwhelming.
Unfairly being compared to Tales of the Jedi, right? Like, that was really at the top. But even then, despite the action, it had lots of action, but I wasn't really sold on Tales of the Empire.
It's the only good parts of it.
So, man, take a risk. Do just kind of a slower, like, Master and Apprentice, because that wasn't right. The combat, the action pack wasn't really Plagueis or Sidious's thing, right? Like, give me some of their adventures in terms of how they're trying to manipulate things, how they're trying to change the Force, how they're trying to gain this knowledge of immortality. Like, I think a lot of Star Wars fans would love to.
I would love it. I just think of like, can you throw out a trailer for this with no action and get people pumped up about it? Like, every trailer scene is just them two lurking around. Talk, like there's got to be something,
Oh man, that I want to see that. Somebody needs to make that trailer now.
It can't be just like
around. Like,
young Palpatine like kicking his dog or something, like learning he's bad. Like,
I get what you're saying. It would be harder to build up hype for it. It'd be hard to sell it to people. That's where I kind of wonder, like, how much. Like, what the viewership is expected on these animated ones anyway. Like,
and maybe it could be,
are they even drawing a casual audience to these tales?
And it's hard to gauge that too.
Because if not, then just do it for the fans, right?
If they're already
not, and if they're easy enough to make, then by all means, like, throw something out there that the fans are going to love.
But you could have some action though. Like, they could be I mean, Sidious had to learn how to duel somehow.
Yep.
So, I mean, he could, Plagueis could be teaching him stuff like that. That could be a trailer thing. He could be learning how to do Force Lightning and like shocking someone. I don't know. Like that would, there's ways you could do that. But I do think that would be a fun story, especially like if they threw in some stuff from the Plagueis novel into that, just to show like, hey,
would make people happy.
We hear y'all. We know you like this. And so, because, they could go to Amazon and just get the numbers on how many of these books have been sold, or like the downloads on Kindle or whatever.
Yeah.
Like just going into that and seeing like, wow, this has like a really big following right now. Let's give them a nod to that. I don't think that would be a bad gesture from Disney Lucasfilm to do this.
Well, not only that, but you alluded to it earlier, like Plagueis, to be so significant of a character, there's nothing other than a name drop and a peek around the wall.
2 seconds.
Right? Like, and so I feel like at some point they've got to give us something on Palpatine's master, right? Like it's such a significant thing at this point. Like you mentioned, I feel like it's inevitable. So why not go ahead and throw it out there in that form? See how people receive it.
Depends on how deep into Abeloth Dave Filoni is and whether he can venture into Plagueis at the same time.
Yeah, that's true.
He's going to be the one that
might have his
it.
hands full. Yeah.
So that's my second one. I have 3 stories, by the way. So that's my second one.
Okay. Did I have any other? Oh no, I did. So I did have one Vader story that I thought would be really interesting.
Okay.
Because I mean, we have to do Vader, right? Like,
yes.
A part of me is like, I don't need more Vader because there's already a ton of stuff out there about Vader. And so if I'm gonna get Sith stories, like, give me something else. But at the same time, like,
give me all the Vader.
It'd be really cool to see Vader still. But when we get little glimpses of like him within Rogue One, and then of course in A New Hope, right, where he gets onto the tail of this thing. I think it would be really cool to see how he gets there, right? Like what's going on with him behind the scenes with Palpatine as they're learning of like this stuff happening, as they're learning of the Stardust project being possibly messed up, and Orson Krennic and Galen Erso, like, they're not like, Vader's not just, it's not like he just finds out about this and shows up at Scarif, right? Like, and so I'd be really curious as to what's going on behind the scenes with him, and maybe who else he's been hunting down, or maybe what other leads he's been following. Because, with something as big as that, like Vader's been on it. So I think it'd be cool to just have an arc, a series that really takes his character up right into Rogue One and A New Hope, where we pick up in the movies, right? Like where we first see Vader in A New Hope, like kind of leading up to that point. I think that'd be interesting. There's a lot of Vader stories out there, and so it's hard for me to like find a time period or a story. Maybe you have one that I'm really like, oh, I want to know that. But I'd love to know like just that sequence of him becoming involved right up to A New Hope and what he was doing, who he was chasing. So,
that would be good be cool. Because I picture, like when you were explaining that in my head, like I picture in Kenobi where he runs, like they're on his fortress and like he goes in and he like throws Reva, and he's like, I told you what failure, or you knew what failure would mean, or something like that, paraphrased. But him like showing up to some Imperial boardroom just meeting when they're and he's just throwing people, and he's like, this is y'all's fault or whatever, and then he's like, get me a ship ready, and it gets you to there. Him just going nuts on all these guys. I think that would be very in character for him at this time.
And it wouldn't add a lot, like lore wise or story wise, but I still think it would be a cool thing to see, and it would be cool to tie that into A New Hope, right? The very first entrance of Darth Vader, like bringing us up to that point specifically would be really cool.
Also, like for Vader, how much does he actually care about the Death Star? You know what I mean? Like, because in episode 4, he's, kind of talking like, it's not just about weaponry and stuff. And then in Rogue One, he's like kind of just toying with Krennic, like, don't choke on your aspirations and things like that. Like,
what to him, it's just like another Imperial project. Like, it's just...
Like, he doesn't care about
another thing the Empire's doing. Yeah. That would be interesting to get some, and he almost seems like dismissive of Krennic and like kind of disdainful of him, like you're beneath me. And so it would be interesting to kind of see his perspective on these other projects. And does he think they're a waste of time? Like in his mind, is the Emperor wasting resources on building these things
on
instead
the political side of it,
instead of the Force side of things, right?
Yep.
Like that's when he talks to Luke, he's like, listen, the Force is it. Like the dark side of the Force is everything. So does he disagree with Palpatine in terms of how they're trying to rule the galaxy? That would be interesting. I hadn't thought about that.
Well, and Palpatine, obviously, he's very interested in the dark side and the Sith and all that. Like, he ends up on Exegol and all that. But his whole deal is power. It's not just, like, the dark side to get it. It's like the dark side is a means to that end. And so Vader, on the other hand, is like, no, like, my power is the dark side. And so I do think that would be an interesting dynamic to explore.
Yeah, agreed.
So my Vader one is I think this is probably the last one we talk about unless we tangent some on it. But my Vader one is a little kind of traditional to what they've done. So two stories, okay? One follows Vader, the other follows Palpatine. All right. So it could be a Palpatine, it could be a Plagueis maybe, but I like the Vader Palpatine dynamic. So I want, because we've seen how Anakin falls to the dark side already.
Right.
So I want to see, and this kind of like overlaps with some other things I want to see, which I think just kind of tells you what I want out of Star Wars in general. But I want Palpatine's story falling to the dark side to the point of no return. So he gets there and he's all the way in. Like there's no, little spots where it's like, well, no, maybe he still is good in there. Like I want his to just be all the way bad. Like in the Plagueis novel, you get him like killing his family in that novel, and they play it off like it was some kind of accident or whatever. Yeah. Like I want him leading up to just how bad he is for 3 episodes, and it can even time jump too. It can go like from when he falls originally, that could be the first episode, like him just going headlong into the dark side. And then it can go on into like something in the prequel era where he's like ready to get in this. And then it could even be like a jump ahead to where he's on Exegol planning this next thing, like where he is just all in on it. At the same time, like alternating episodes, I want a Vader story between Revenge of the Sith and Return of the Jedi, skipping time throughout. Each time, like just a little bit of humanity where it shows he's not gone yet. Like, and it's his slow turn back to the light side. And the finishing story, the last episode of Vader's can be like, it can show just a glimpse of when he saves Luke and then him becoming a Force ghost, which is in that it's in the From a Certain Point of View book for the Return of the Jedi. There's like a little short story about it. And so just like maybe him going from there a few minutes into becoming a Force ghost, and then like that redeemed Anakin Force ghost, and just so that way it's like opposite sides of the coin.
I like that.
I think that would be a very deep story that maybe they couldn't tell in like 15-minute episodes, but it would be cool if they could.
It would be really cool to see that Vader is not Palpatine, right? Like despite the imposing, intimidating, seemingly evil figure that he poses to everyone, like seeing that he and Palpatine are distinctly different, like at their core, would be really cool. And just going back to like the little pieces of humanity, like I think that would be really cool. It's not the same story at all, but they've kind of done the same thing with Andor, right? Like we see Cassian's turn in Rogue One, and now throughout Andor, we're seeing where he starts. It's kind of like I don't care. Like I'm here for me and myself. But we're seeing those little instances where it's like they're planting seeds of him understanding what sacrifice is, right? What compassion and selflessness looks like. And so you could totally do that with Vader, right? Like just plant little things that really enrich when he finally turns back to the light side. I think that could be really cool. I like that idea. And even if you didn't do, I was just thinking about this when you said it, like if you didn't do Palpatine, but this wouldn't really be a Tales of the Sith. It'd be like a Tales of the Chosen One. I don't know. But again, if you had like a story that follows some moments with Anakin and some story that follows moments with Vader, and somehow they connect like things
each
that
time.
happen to Anakin he comes across later that kind of makes him remember something about himself or something he did.
That would be good.
That could be really cool to kind of put back in those little pieces of humanity that leads up to his redemption. I like both of those ideas.
And like the time jumping too does make it to where you can get to like these wide swaths of things as well.
Yeah, you changed my mind. I didn't think there was a lot that I was really super interested in learning about Vader, but I would totally buy into that idea of just seeing little pieces of what helps kind of bring him back to the light eventually. That would be.
And the ultimate thing would, it's Luke, right? Luke is the answer. And so maybe one of those episodes is like pre-episode 4. One of those episodes is post-episode 5. And then, you get that Return of the Jedi finale type thing. And so it is like, okay, this, and then, oh, wow, there's Luke. And then you really start to see, the wheels turn for him go the other way. Well, and then after Return of the Jedi.
Yeah. And like one of those little snippets could be like him reflecting on what he thinks is the loss of his children, right? Like,
oh yeah.
At some point that had to have occurred to him. Like that's not something that he, because Anakin Skywalker is so excited about the thought of having this family. There's no way that Darth Vader never thinks about that.
Yep.
So having a moment where that does bother him, right? Like just kind of pointing towards the future of then discovering, oh, my children are alive, like that, making that discovery even more impactful. Like it's already
when he only knew child, he only knew child for the longest.
Yeah,
and then he figures out children.
That'd be cool.
He only figures out about Leia on the Death Star, the second Death Star, right?
Yeah, because Luke doesn't know how to secure his thoughts. So
loser,
untrained.
He almost ruined the whole thing. So I think those would be fun stories. Now, obviously, there's so many more stories you could tell. You could have I think Dooku's actually pretty well covered between the Clone Wars and what we already have. But you could do some Darth Maul stuff. You could do, obviously, Palpatine Plagueis. You could probably throw Balin's skull in there. Would be super interesting. But he's not a Sith. But you could, make for it what you will. You could have an Exegol story. You could go back way back. Like, there's a lot of possibilities.
There's all manner of Legends characters you can pull in too. Just like a great way to use them without feeling like they have to become super significant. It's just here's a little short story that features one of these characters, Darth Krayt or Lumia or whoever. That'd be cool.
But it does just kind of like what you said to start this off with. It throws in the truth that there's just not a lot out there for it. And so obviously we know nothing about anything, especially like insider knowledge on anything. Like that's less than nothing about anything.
We have zero connections.
Yeah, right. Like as most Star Wars fans have none. But like just as a fan looking at this from like, it almost seems like this has to happen at some point. Like why would you do a Tales of the Jedi without a plan of, hey, you know who the Jedi's enemy are? There's the Sith. Why would we not
right?
Why would we not do a Tales of the Sith? So I would not be surprised in the least if, like, within the next year or two, they announce that. So maybe, like, this is an episode we can revisit in a year and be like, well, they didn't choose any of our stuff, but,
as I would probably
as they should.
expect.
As they should not choose any of our stuff. But this was,
I don't know. We had some pretty good ideas.
A lot of fun. Yeah.
We had some pretty good ones. Yeah.
I don't think all of our ideas would flop. Maybe just some of them.
No, I figure we love Star Wars enough between the two of us that there would be at least one decent idea that would make sense. So,
right. Yeah. They probably won't do that Acolyte idea for a little while though.
Yeah, no, that they're gonna probably bury everything Acolyte for a while.
They're gonna let it be cool in like 15 or 20 years, like they've done with the prequels. Like now that because the prequels are cool again.
There are books coming out, right?
Yeah, that's just kind of like the olive branch. Be like,
are they still coming out? They cancel them, did they?
We do care. See, we're going to write some books. Yeah, but no, I think it's something we will see at some point. So looking ahead, next week's episode, we have not talked about it yet, so I don't know if you have any ideas, but it
We're
can
just trying
just
to get back with this episode.
Yeah, so I think so. Here's a couple things that I have thought about. There has been a little bit of news, so there's a lot going on with the Rey movie.
Yeah,
with like directors leaving, but Daisy Ridley has good things to say, stuff like that.
Yeah.
There's some news on when the Mando movie is finished filming. So there's stuff like that to talk about. So I think maybe we dive into those 3 movie projects, like the Rey movie, Mando, and the Jedi Origins movie did have some news as well. So maybe we hop in.
Yeah, I saw that.
I think that guy also left, right?
Why is there... No, I thought the director
said
they confirmed
they confirmed the filming date for that one.
Yeah. That they had a date to start filming.
There's some news about the movies, and odds are this is the 29th of October at filming. There's probably some... Yeah, there may be some more news. So I think maybe we do a little movie news roundup.
Okay, why is there no news about the Rogue Squadron movie? That's what I want to know.
Oh, that is long gone.
You think it's completely dead? Never coming?
No one's ever truly gone.
This is like the whole Star Wars 1313 again. You remember when LucasArts pushed out that game? You were going to play as like a young bounty hunter that everybody thought might be Boba Fett.
Yeah.
LucasArts vanished. This is just like that again. They like gave me
and you've seen like the videos
took it away
too, right?
Yeah. No, everybody was super excited about it.
Cool stuff.
And then Disney was like, "We're closing LucasArts." Jerks.
Yeah. So that'll be next week. We'll talk Star Wars movie news. So, audience, if you're a real one and made it 48 minutes into this or whatever this is, you're certainly a real one at this point. And so, drop in the comments what Tales of the Sith that you would like to see. And thanks for watching. We will catch you guys next time.